Alright, so today we're going to be working on this pit bike a little bit. I want to kind of catch you guys up to speed on what we've got going on here. So I bought this bike probably 4 years ago or greater, and it was a really cool bike. It looked way different than what it is now. Long story short, I ended up pretty much trashing the whole bike after 2 solid years of riding this little thing. It's a SSR 110. Can't remember what year, maybe a 2017. But a lot of this stuff is pretty temporarily set up on here. I quit working on it probably about 8 months ago and started focusing on the truck a little bit, trying to get it done. So this thing's just kind of been sitting back in the corner. This is kind of where I left it at. So we've got temporary boost leak fix, some other little things. The carburetor still needs jetted. I did have it fired up and it was definitely getting way too much oil, so we're definitely going to have to restrict the oil flow on that. And I also think we've got a boost leak somewhere in there because it wasn't really picking up on the gauge, moving it at all. So something's going on there. We've still got to pressurize the fuel tank, pressurize the carburetor. I put a new stator on it. I'm pretty sure it's leaking back from there, but I don't know if it's going to be too much to worry about right now. We'll probably just run it how it is. This was an old exhaust off of a car that my buddy had laying around at his shop. And I ended up taking it, chopping it all up, trying to make somewhat of a little exhaust for this turbo so it wasn't dumping directly on my leg. As you can see, we've kind of got the oil drain ran. It drains pretty good. We've got the wire mounted up here so we can keep track of our RPMs and our hours, things like that. Here's the boost gauge we've got, just a little cheap boost gauge and cheap wideband. We've got a wideband in the exhaust. I've tried several different spots now and I cannot find a power source to power up the wideband. I've had all of this stuff tore apart numerous times. I've tried pretty much every wire I can think of to get it to power up the wideband. That's the last thing we've got left. It's ground, it's got everything else, but nothing seems to power it. Every time I hook it up to a hot wire, it'll just not allow the bike to start, or if I start the bike first and then put the power on, it'll just kill it. So that's not working out for us. I think we're going to end up having to put a battery on it, a little 12-volt battery, just to get this to power up. I really wanted the wideband to work, so then it would make tuning this thing way easier versus me having to do it by ear. We've got a mount off of one of the giant exhausts that normally come on these bikes, and I've just bent it down and around. I was in the process of trying to make that fit and be able to put something in here. I would like to kind of teardrop this exhaust right off the edge of the fender on the new plastics we've got. I'll post some pictures up of what it looked like. But since the tear down, the motor has remained stock, besides putting a new stator in it, a giant carburetor. Can't remember if it's 26 or 28 millimeters, I'm not really sure. That turbo is off of a snowmobile. We've changed the gear ratio up a little bit and added way bigger wheels and tires and suspension. It has a stretch swing arm on it and a 14-inch back wheel. And I believe it had a 10-inch back wheel on it before. And then now we've got, I believe, a 17-inch front wheel. Yeah, 17-inch front wheel and it had either a 10 or 12 on it before. We've got inverted forks on it now with way bigger triple trees, way bigger forks, way more travel. The bike right now sits pretty level since I adjusted those out. We've still got to hook up the kill switch and do a lot of other small things to it. But this is just to kind of catch you guys up to speed on where I'm at with it. I've got the foot pegs in the garage painted. They've been painted for 10 months now, probably, waiting to be slapped on. Never rode the bike yet since the rebuild. We've got new caliper, new chain, sprockets, new masters. Yeah, new Kickstarter. Rear brake lever's the same. I ended up taking the factory, well, it wasn't a factory exhaust, it had an aftermarket exhaust on it, but I ended up pretty much just pivoting it off of this, right in the head where it bolts to, and then brought it up here, chopped it off, and was able to mount the turbo on it. It's solid, it's not going anywhere. Especially once we get the rest of the exhaust bolted down. Still got to fix this wastegate flap because it does open up just a hair. I really don't want to weld it, so we're going to try to figure out a solution to hold that back. I'll get these plastics thrown on really quick and kind of give you guys an idea of what it looks like. So yeah, obviously the plastics are not sitting down on it flush. And it is so funny looking because of the big wheels and big suspension. It just completely overpowers how big the bike is itself. It was so tiny before compared to what it is now. It's got the high risers on it, the tall bars, tall suspension, big wheels. It is very funny looking right now. And we are going to heat wrap the exhaust. I'm not sure about the lower part if we're going to do it or not, but the downpipe definitely. Really ain't trying to burn my leg. So we've definitely got a lot more to go. I wish I would have started recording it when I first started it because there's been a lot to learn about this. We're definitely getting closer though, so we're gonna try to get this thing done. All right, now that we're back in the garage, our first job is going to be restricting this oil feed line so it's not dumping so much oil into the turbo itself, because it was literally dumping out everywhere, smoking like a freight train. It was all bad. So we're going to pop off this oil feed right here, and we're going to see what we can shove in there to try to restrict the oil flow a little bit. If you're wondering what this is and why it's not blocked off, I do have the block off plates for it. I just have not put them on yet, just because everything's still pretty temporary on this, just to make sure everything will fit and clear. And as you may be able to tell, in some spots the clearance is very, very tight, but we do clear everywhere. So we don't have any problems with that so far. But this is for antifreeze to run through the turbo to cool the turbo down with antifreeze. But since this bike does not have a factory radiator, we are not going to utilize that because I'm not going to put one on. And we're just going to block it off and hope for the best. As you may assume, yes, this is definitely way too much oil flow for this tiny turbo. Yeah, definitely for this, we're going to have to restrict this down. I'm not really sure what we're going to use yet, or how much it really even needs restricted. But I'm sure this motor is going to blow up before the turbo anyway, regardless of even if we had any oil in it at all. But we're not going to think like that. We're going to hope for the best. But for right now, I'm going to see what I got to maybe just jam in there. It might work. I don't know. I'll see what I got. Okay, so I may have found something that may temporarily work for us. This is actually an adapter for a antenna on one of the bullet antennas that I bought. And I figured maybe we need like a -4. I'm not sure. Somewhere around there. But this is actually got 215 thousandths port on this side. This side is a little bit bigger before the threads. About 300. Outer diameter is about 393 thousandths. And if we check our oil feed line right here, we're getting pretty much 380, 400 thousandths. Granted, it's been on there. About 350, back where it's kind of good inside of there. So I think we'll actually be able to cut this down, because we do not need all this length right there, especially with how far this barb goes inside of the oil feed line. So we'll just need a little piece, and it's not going to be too small and go in there, and it should stay pretty tight around the line. I may put another hose clamp right back here somewhere just to kind of hold onto this to make sure this piece don't move nowhere. But I think if anything, it'll push itself up against this and wouldn't be no big deal at all. The holes would line up pretty good. Everything should be good. So we're going to get this cut down a little bit, and we're going to try to smash it in there and see if it works. Okay, now that we got our piece buzzed off, kind of file this burr down, and we'll see if it fits inside of our oil feed tube or not. Close enough. Man, like a glove. The only thing is, I don't think I'll ever be able to get it back out. So you need to make sure there ain't no burrs on the inside really quick. Kind of chamfering bit on the inside, just to make sure if there's any sort of burrs on the inside, that we'll take care of that so nothing will feed into the turbo, cause any catastrophic failures. Okay, we've got our chamfering bit. We got a piece. Perfect. Man, I still don't feel like it's going to be enough restriction. I guess from here, at least we could put a carburetor jet inside of that and restrict it down way more. I just couldn't stick a carburetor jet in there to begin with, or else it would have just fell down all the way through. But this, my guy, might work. Man, that is perfect. All right, I believe that should be recessed back in there far enough. If not, that'll push it the rest of the way. Then we'll put a clamp around here, around the barb. And we'll also put another clamp right on the outside, around this piece, just to kind of make sure it's not going to go anywhere. And hopefully the barb will hit it just a little bit and kind of straighten up that piece inside of there, just to make sure everything kind of lines up. Better put the hose clamp on. Perfect. Alright, we'll get another hose clamp for the bottom, which I should have put on prior to tightening that one down. But it's okay because we can unscrew it all the way and just wrap it around it. Put it back together. I was thinking ahead, just not that far. Alright. So I believe our piece is right here. Right there. That should be plenty good. Alright, next thing we're going to do, we're going to slap on the foot pegs, which I had to do a lot of modifications to. This is the original foot peg rest that bolts down underneath the motor. And when I installed these aftermarket foot pegs, they were totally twisted all up. So I had to heat up each side and bend them to where I'm pretty sure they'll be flat once it's bolted down, but I guess we'll find out. Alright, that should be pretty close to where they need to go. Now I just need to find the bolts. Yeah. Alright, we're gonna take this bike off the stand to get to these last ones. Skid plate's a little cockeyed, so it's kind of hard. Okay, so now that the foot pegs are done, we're going to move on to getting rid of this janky setup. And it'll run at an idle, I know that, but I'm not sure if it'll run under boost. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to utilize this vacuum right here, and we're going to plumb it into the fuel tank up top, and we'll also run it into probably the bowl on the carburetor. So we're going to tee this off and try to run a couple different lines here and there, and hopefully it'll still run and it'll hold fuel under boost. I'm still not sure if the intake setup is going to work really with building boost or not. I don't picture this motor to really build much anyway, but I want it to do as much as it can. So we may end up doing a different setup with the intake, do something a lot bigger, get a lot more volume, hopefully be able to build a little bit more boost if that's the problem. But right now we're going to work on teeing this off and getting air pressure supplied in the carburetor and the fuel tank. Now granted, this is all a temporary setup, but I'm not even sure if it needs it or if it'll work yet. So we're going to kind of roll with this for a minute and just see what we can do. Alright, I just got our vent tube hooked up. Kind of temporarily ran through along with everything else. This is kind of the setup we've got going on right now. So we've got it plumbed into the bottom of the carb, coming off of the turbo, into the fuel tank. And theoretically, that should pressurize the fuel tank and pressurize the bowl in the carburetor to allow for that extra fuel to be consumed as the turbo's spooling and burning all that extra fuel. Theoretically. There's still some other things to trim up, like these zip ties for the wiring harness. I tried to clear up all the wiring harness as much as I could. I had to have this wire coming off of the spark plug wire just to read the RPMs. But other than that, and then these ghetto hoses we've got now, everything's pretty much well hid once the plastics get sat on it. And I was kind of trying to go for a clean look with the bike. So once the plastics are all on, all you'll pretty much see is just turbo, all the necessities that look cool, not all the wiring that comes with all the gauges and everything like that. Alright, so now what I'm going to try to do is find something to hold this wastegate flap back, so then it's not halfway flapping open and not half the time. So we'll completely shut it off, and then she'll build all the boost it possibly can. Alright, so now we're going to figure out some way of holding this wastegate flap shut, because I had to completely remove the whole external wastegate actuator off of the side just because I've got it turned all these different directions and it only kind of goes one way. It won't just fit anywhere around it. Plus, we're trying to build all the boost it possibly can anyway, so there's no need for the actuator because I doubt it'll even build enough to move it. But we need to close that. It won't really come open very far anyway because of this flange, but it still does a little bit, and we don't want that little bit of boost coming out like that. So we're going to find something to secure this with without welding it. Alright, so I've got several of these little guys laying around for whatever reason, and we'll see if we can make some of these work. I'm trying to hold this back. I'm not sure where we're going to come off of yet, so these different lengths will kind of give us different ideas. Then we'll go from there, see if we need to find some different springs or what. But I'm pretty sure a spring's going to be the best option right here. But I'm not really sure yet, so we'll see what we kind of run into. Alright, so I've got these springs kind of holding the wastegate where it needs to be. as far up as it can go. And I'm pretty sure we can take this one, loop it around, and bolt it right to that bolt that bolts to the turbo. The bend ain't very right, but I'm going to try to bend it a little bit and then try to use that bolt to hold it down. See what that looks like. Alright, so we got the spring pretty bent up, and I'm pretty sure it's going to work out pretty good at using that bolt to hold this down. So we're going to take this bolt out right quick and slap this on there and see what happens. Okay, now we can unhook these little springs. Let's check our wastegate. Nice and tight. It's not going to come open on its own, definitely not. You can do it a little bit if you try real hard. As long as the spring stays in there, I think we'll be alright. Alright, I'd crimp this down a little bit better around here, which actually tightened it up a little bit more. So now it's solid. You cannot move it at all. And it should stay in there a lot better. Alright, now we're going to hook up this kill switch. Alright, so I cannot find my little clamp pieces to hook to the bar. So we're going to move on, and we're going to get this thing finished up. So we've got a good mount for this, and we'll put the plastics back on. And then we'll probably work on trying to cut the exhaust to get a nice little teardrop kind of shape is what I'm trying to go with. And then we'll slide the grips on, and we'll go from there. Alright, so the plastics are roughly back on. Just sitting on there right now. We'll get everything bolted down and see what everything kind of looks like, where it all sits at. Alright, so I've got a piece of tube cut that we're going to try to stick around here, around the exhaust. But we're not going to stick it in there yet because I am going to heat wrap the whole exhaust and do all of that, so that'll get put on once that happens. Alright, so for the most part, this is how the plastic's going to sit. Everything's kind of tightened down. I would like to get this down a little bit more. Definitely going to try to see what I can do. But now we can kind of figure out where the exhaust is going to get chopped off at. Or we could just bolt a giant muffler to it. It's already got the flange. Or maybe something like that. Maybe something more along the lines, something like that. Yeah, I kind of like that. I'm going to trace that out real quick. Okay, since I've already taken up so much time in this video, we're going to kind of cut it short on this one, and we'll pick up where we left off on the next one. So as of right now, we are just going to unbolt the exhaust, take out the O2 sensor. We'll have to take the plastics back off again to remove this mount, and we'll get this cut and we'll put it back on there and see how that looks. And that'll wrap up this video. So this is kind of the shape I've got traced out right here. And this is what we're gonna cut. Hopefully it'll look like a teardrop. I've never cut something like this, so this will be a first time trying it. Hopefully it works out. And I believe once we get the mount finished, these plastics will come down a little bit more. But for right now, that's what we're gonna cut out. So I'm gonna take out this O2 sensor and unbolt this from the turbo. Okay, so this is definitely not finished yet, but it's getting close to the right shape. And I'm just gonna put it on the bike again, just to make sure I've got the right angle and everything's kind of on center. So we'll put this on really quick and just see how it kind of looks with the rear tire. All right, put the exhaust back on it. I went out and trimmed it up a little bit more, which it needs a little bit more taken off of this side, I believe. But not really sure how I'm feeling with it yet. I think the bottom's gonna have to come back a little bit more. But this wraps up this video. On the next one, we'll completely wrap up the exhaust job, get all this done, get it heat wrapped, mount on the back of the exhaust. We'll be doing a startup of it, making sure everything's pretty good as far as the oil flow and carburetor, the way we've got everything kind of ran. And we'll see if the boost gauge works and see what else we got to fix along those lines.